How many are going? Those there.
It's one.
I have one.
Good morning, everyone. We are here at El Cerrito High School for the Board Educational Retreat Leading an Anti-Racist School District, presented to us by Dr. Rochelle Rogers Ard. We will start with our opening procedures. Today is March 8th, 2024. We're going to start with the call of order and pledge of
It's her volume.
Okay, Dr. Hurst, go ahead with the pledge.
Let's go.
You want them to see? Oh, hold on.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Hurst. Clerk Gonzalez Hoy, would you mind doing the land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, of course. But do we want to figure out how to fix it first? I think that they can.
The feedback?
You gotta turn that sound.
What would you like us to? Try this? Mute me? Should I mute myself? They can't hear. Everyone give us 1 second. We're gonna try to fix the audio. All right, let's try. Oh, maybe.
And just unmute. for you.
All right, so we're gonna do the land acknowledgement.
We recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Karkan, Ohlone peoples, and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to go to the labor and body recognition. I acknowledge that the burden of the environmental exploitation and systemic injustice fall upon the labor of Black and brown bodies in the building of this country and its institutions. I remember that Black and brown people were born and died working this land against their will for generations. I also acknowledge the continued contribution of the labor of survivors over the centuries to today, of all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples in the building of what we refer to as the United States. The author of that statement was Dr. Rochelle Rogers Ard. Dr. Hurst, will you please do roll call?
Absolutely. President Smith Folds,
Good morning, everyone. Present.
Clerk Gonzalez Hoy,
Present.
Trustee Christian,
Good morning, President.
Trustee Reckler is absent. Trustee Phillips is absent.
Thank you so much. Now, everyone, we're going to go to public comment. This meeting will provide public comment opportunities on agenda and non-agenda items in person through Zoom and through the Zoom app and by telephone. Public comment will occur at the beginning of the meeting. Public comment will last for 1 hour. The time allotted for each speaker is 2 minutes. If you are attending the meeting in person, you will need to submit a request to address the board form to indicate your desire to speak on an agenda item. If participating via Zoom, you will need to raise your hand by clicking the appropriate icon in the Zoom app or by pressing *9 if accessing the meeting by phone. No yielding of time or substitution of speaker is permitted. Due to the Brown Act, board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda and do not usually respond to items presented in public comment. Staff, do we have any public comment? Thank you so very much. Board, we are now moving to agenda item A7, agenda review and adoption. Board, are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. We are going to have we're moving to item B1, anti-racism training. Everyone, thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy this retreat. I am complete.
fires that have to be put out.
Absolutely.
There's conversations that have to be had. And we are in that position that we have done it for so long, especially those of us who have been in positionality for decades at multiple districts, doing multiple things.
Yeah.
But it's this kind of arrogance that if I'm not behaving the way you want me to behave, then I'm disrespecting you. Instead of, you must be so professional that you're able to do a couple of things at once. Because it's not like after that, the person was like, sorry, can you repeat it? I wasn't paying attention, or I didn't hear it, or, so that's one example for me.
Okay,
I'm complete.
okay. Dr. Hurd?
I have a couple of examples to share with you,
Yeah.
and I do agree that we should name it.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do, especially recently, is really name inconsistencies. So a clear example was I had an email from an individual, and they were attacking a staff member. And it was really about a protocol that we call secure mode. And what this individual was saying is that, hey, Dr. Hurst, why are we using this term, or why is communications using this term? I've never really heard this before. This really needs to be explained. So I did my research, and I really went back to this individual, and I said, actually, we've been using this term for more than a year, and the previous communication director uses term secure mode. So I really had to present like the evidence. So that was one, and just kind of naming the inconsistency. Another clear example was I got an email from an individual that stated, hey, Dr. Hurst, there's a very serious problem with anti-Semitism in WCCUSD. What steps are you taking to correct it? These are your employees. So very demanding, accusatory, attacking manner. And what I did is I just responded, just kind of naming it. And I just responded, I appreciate you sending this to me. Please know and understand that I have a desire to address every wrong thing in the district. However, the tone of your email implies an expectation that I am immediately aware of all issues, this issue, and that I have an immediate response. I wish that you would have said something like, I know that you and your team are working hard on many things. However, I want to bring this issue to your attention. Can you please keep me informed on steps you and your team are taking to address this? Thank you for your time and your attention to this matter. So I do believe in naming it. And I will say as well, I have to take a step back whenever I'm being attacked, because it doesn't feel good. So I try to take a step back, I try to reflect, and then I try to name it.
Perfect examples. First of all, nobody wants to be attacked. You're walking down the street going, okay, can you please attack me? Right?
Right.
No one wants that, and no one deserves that. No one deserves that. So we must absolutely name the behavior. What I love about your second example was a reframe, which I believe we would do in classrooms, right? We would say to the child, well, when you said that to me, I didn't appreciate that. I would have loved it if you could have said this. Like, that's how we reframe. And we need to reframe for adults. In your example, Director Smith-Folds, what I thought was interesting, you said something very interesting. The person said, hey, what was, they're not paying, can you say that again, something about attention?
So the person was like, hey, stop what you're doing and pay attention to what I'm saying. It was a public commenter.
Okay,
During a board
so
meeting.
in that moment, and they were speaking to all the board members or maybe
No,
one?
they were speaking to one person.
Okay, in that moment, what I really want is that person to say, I'm wondering what that looks like for you. I would like the board to not defend and say, I was paying attention. I was also doing this, all this stuff has to happen, because when someone's angry, they don't really care about that. So I would, tell me what paying attention looks like for you. Tell me what that looks like. then after they say that, well, you know, because you were talking, I was talking, and then when they say that, you say, tell me what this feels like for you.
Okay.
Because what it feels like for me
Uh-huh,
Mm,
uh-huh,
is control.
uh-huh,
mm,
uh-huh.
So tell me what this feels like for you,
mhm,
right? Well, I want you to, when I'm talking, I want you to pay attention to me. I've heard you say that 3 times, but tell me what that looks like. Can you give me some examples of what that looks like? I'm in inquiry,
mhm.
but I'm not defending. Because my entire job is to sit here while you come to public comment. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
do we not do this every 2 weeks or whatever? Like, that's my entire job. But I'm not gonna defend because the attack, there's a difference in someone saying, I really would love to be heard. And if you could please stop what you're doing so that I can be heard while I'm here, that would make, that's a request.
Mhm,
Stop what you're doing, pay attention to me, you not listen to me, those are attacks.
mhm, mhm.
Right? And what we must do for adults as well as young people, right, is model the behavior that we want to see. It's really hard when people are upset. I get it. People are upset, things happen at board meetings, you know. I grew up in Oakland, so, you know, I've had, you know, really rough, we have had really, really rough board meetings.
Mm.
But I also just want to say that just because you're board members doesn't mean you have to be attacked.
Mm. Mm.
That's not like when you signed up to be a board member, it was like part of your job description is to be attacked because people don't know how to act. That's not necessary. And I just want to say, because I know people are listening, no adult in our system should be attacked, right? It's not just board members. If we're going to move towards anti-racism, we must seek the humanity
Mm.
in each other. And what I'm saying by that means I don't have to agree with you. Your politics don't have to be my politics. Your candidate doesn't have to be my candidate. You may not like me, you may not like what I do, what I say, but I am going to treat you with respect, even in that dislike, because is that not what we want for our young people? Right? So we must model that, and we must also remind people how to treat us.
Mm.
Yes,
You know, I was just gonna make a comment on the fact that people know what they do. And
Yes.
they do it for a reason, for a purpose.
Yes.
How they truly feel in their heart,
yes,
and they express it in a way, you know, I don't like,
yes,
Mm.
and I particularly don't care for your
yes,
community.
yes,
So, you know, people express that in so many ways. And then they teach it to their children
yes,
and the kids and everybody's, you know, the kids' mouth. I mean, kids get it from the parents.
absolutely.
So, you know, for any, just say for example, for any teacher to mount, I call it a pulpit classroom,
Yes,
which is a pulpit. And you lecture and connecting to all the students in the classroom.
yes,
And you're showing every student that they have a purpose. Since I've been teaching over like in Oakland, such as teaching over there, you know, before I even started, I let every kid know, every student know they have a purpose in life. That you're somebody. And by connecting to these students, letting them know that you can achieve your goals. You know,
yes,
with teachers, some teachers get in there and they have their way of doing things,
yes.
but they don't embrace their students.
No, I definitely hear you. I definitely hear you. To your earlier point, though, I understand, you know, I'm a certain age. I understand that everyone's not gonna like me. You know, I'm an acquired taste. I get that. And you have a right to not like me.
Mhm.
And I may not like you either. I mean, but you know, like, we don't like, that's fine. You don't have to like me, my race, my gender, my sexual orientation, like none of that requires, and let me do it this way. I don't have to like you in order to treat you as a human.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't have to agree with you. I can disagree with humanity. I can disagree with respect. I can say as an adult, wow, I don't particularly care for your kind. With respect, though, I can say that. And so I want to be clear is we as board members, as leaders of the school district must say to the adults in this ecosystem, we don't have to like each other
Mm.
and we don't have to agree,
Yes,
but we must treat each other with decency, humanity, and respect.
yes,
Mhm,
And that's all we're asking.
yes.
mhm,
And then I argue that once you treat someone with decency, humanity, and respect, I can hear your side, even if I disagree,
Yes.
and then we can agree to disagree.
Yes.
The issue is when people, particularly people who are used to being in power, when those people feel like their power is being unseated,
Yes.
then they respond with what Carol Anderson calls white rage.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so Carol Anderson says, white rage shows itself in a variety of ways. The entire movement to be an anti-racist school district is gonna be responded to with white rage.
Yes.
mm,
I don't have time to go through that book, but the premise of the book is white rage has shown itself in a variety of different ways. Both really, really big ways. So January 6th was white rage.
Mhm.
Burning of crosses is white rage. Those are big things. But the more subtler areas of white rage are dehumanization, disrespect, ignoring of authority.
Mhm.
All of those things are white rage.
Vouchers.
Mhm.
All of
Yeah.
the,
Mm.
how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to do is say, this feels like white rage.
Mhm.
Well, that may not have been your intent,
Mhm.
although I would argue
Mhm.
sometimes it is intent,
Mhm.
but whether or not it was an intent is irrelevant.
Mhm.
Here's the impact of that, and I need to know if we can have this conversation with humanity, decency, and respect, and if not,
Yeah.
I can no longer engage at this level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
This is a really helpful conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that I would love to hear your thoughts on like how important and how beneficial is it? Like, I understand we're doing this because we have to start and reinforcing that we're an anti-racist system. I understand that in order to do so, we need to start pushing back on things that we see and hear. But there are situations, especially at board meetings, that happen.
Yeah.
I tend to ignore them to move forward. And I do that all the time. And I think that I'm starting to be more constant, more thoughtful that I'm doing that purposely. And it doesn't feel good, but at the same time, like part of me is like, let's just move forward. And I'm not saying that I'm doing that right. So I would love to learn from you, like, how important is it for us? Like, let's say that a vote happens and like, let's say that people of color were united on that vote. And I'm not saying that's happening here, but I'm saying like that, let's use that as an example, yes. How important is it to stop and say, I believe this was done because of race as an issue, right? Or like, is that even important to like, because it will probably lead to discomfort, it will lead to disagreements, it will lead to drama, right? Because we hear that a lot, like, oh, you guys are just causing drama, right? Like, how important is it in those moments? Or is it more important that we pick our battles and we specifically choose what moments we want to push back on anti-racist behavior?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So
Yes, sorry.
sometimes there's a vote.
Yeah.
The vote results in a pushback against a specific racist policy.
Sure.
Right? And then who is calling it who is saying that then that was, I want to make sure I'm understanding.
Sorry, so, yeah, I think that like in situations where like, for example, we are basing a decision because we understand race is part of it,
Yes,
right? And like, we have to take a stance because race is part of it.
yes.
But then like, let's say like the people of color move forward and the public's not able to hear or see that like race is part of it too, because there's so much like behind the scenes too about it, right? Like, how important is it that we call out things like that? Or like, whenever something is said, but the public doesn't really know like the impact and background of that
Right,
comment,
right.
but it's race, it's embedded in race and a race issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How do we respond to white rage? How do we respond to white rage when that rage comes in, especially number 3 and 4 that you said, dehumanization? You guys are acting like buffoons when it comes in disrespect. I know that you did this because you're all Black and brown. That's why you made this decision. We need to diversify the board because it has too many Black and brown people and they're destroying our community. When ignoring authority, ma'am, your time is up. The clock has ran out. You need to sit down. I'm gonna keep talking. Let them speak. They have a First Amendment right to speak, but we have procedures and protocols for how we do public comment. How do we respond to white rage in the moment? And we all have our personal ways of doing it. So Kurt Gonzalez-Hoy was very vulnerable and said, I kind of like to just push past so we can keep moving.
Yeah.
I personally dig deeper in,
Yes.
right? Like my heels then just come, because then I become frozen in the like, let's go. You want to go? Let's go.
Yeah.
And then we have other people that have other ways of dealing with it. How do we as a collective board
Right.
have strategies that
Right.
we all agree on to combat white rage that then makes all of us grow to be the best version of ourselves? Maybe I don't have to dig in all the way because I have 4 or 5 other people who are saying we're pushing this together.
Yeah.
Maybe Trustee Kurt Gonzalez-Hoy doesn't have to ignore because we all have the same voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But I think
not
that to your
ignore, but,
point, like we
push
need to
it.
find that middle ground. And that's what I'm
Right.
curious to hear from you,
Yeah.
Dr. Wood. Because I think that like, I am also ingrained in ignoring because that's what I've done my whole life. Whenever anything is racist towards me,
Yes.
like I have pushed to being like, I laugh about it, I ignore it. I like even join at the joke, right? That's been my safety mechanism to
Yeah.
do so,
Mhm.
since I came to this country. And I think that I have learned not to call it out.
Right.
And I think that to some extent, like, I don't think that we need to potentially like respond and fight every fight. So like, how do we find that
What's the-
middle?
Where's the balance? Because
Yes.
I've color purpled it my all life. You know, all my life I had to fight. So how do we find this balance in
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
I actually think that you and I make a good leadership team because of our personal experiences
Yeah.
that we bring to the table. But how do we
Yeah.
make it tangible?
Yeah.
Mm.
So let me just say, I am not the expert on white rage, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because I am always not shocked but disappointed
Mhm.
at the numerous ways in which people of the dominant caste
Mhm.
continue to use their privilege in ways that other folks just would never do.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it continues to happen.
Special Olympics is getting ready to get started.
I'm sorry,
Oh, it's 10.
we
We'll
just got a
come back
text, I'm
to
sorry.
that.
Yeah.
Perfect break.
Right,
time.
yeah.
Can you put the movie back at 10:15?
10:15? Yeah, okay.
We can
I'm
do
gonna-
that stuff.
And the door's locked.
Yes, I'm gonna skip all of this.
Thank you.
No, I'm gonna skip all this.
I'm sorry, we like.
No, this is what's most important.
There you go, so, yeah, turn more that way. No, the other way. There you go.
It's unmuted.
It's unmuted?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. We're back from our break.
Please forgive us for it, a longer time than we had posted. Dr. Rogers-Ard, thank you so much. We are ready when you are, ma'am.
Cool, thank you. So as I was thinking about the question was, how can we come together as a board? And I think that we're going to get there. Given what we have to do today, I'm gonna hold that question only because I think as we continue looking at the work that we have to do, we're gonna grow to it. the short answer is we have to trust each other. We have to decide how we want to show up as a board. And we have to work together to hold each other accountable towards that. That's the short answer.
Okay.
The longer answer is, I think that as you do more work together as a board, you'll start to build some of those, what I call the musculature, so that you'll know, Director Smith-Pose is about to go in, so
Uh-huh.
we better have her pause so that we can take it, because otherwise we'll be here forever in those types of things. Like, I think we'll be able to work on that. But I want to come back to that as we do a couple more retreats. It's really about being able to know each other and to build. And I also want to be really transparent and say, I'm aware that 2 of our board members are missing, and it's really hard to come together as an entire board. This is the second retreat I've done. The same 2 board members were missing the last time, and organizationally, it is difficult to move forward as a unit when 2 people are consistently absent, and we need to address it. So I want to make sure that I spoke that into record.
Okay.
I've jumped around on my deck because I think that conversation that we have is really important, but and so I've cut some things out. But what I do want to do to address some of the things that you were dealing with, when last we met, I talked about the 4 levels of racism, and where you are, let me just say it here, at the school board level, you're trying to impact institutional racism, right? This is what happens within your institution. You would love to be able to solve racism structurally, which would mean all the school districts, but I think we have enough to deal with. With just West Contra Costa. So as a school board, your life should be here.
Okay.
The problem is, what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of this. There's a lot of personal, interpersonal attacks. I think one of the ways that you're going to be able to respond to your constituency is to say, here's what this work is. Our role is to look at discriminatory treatment, policies, and practices within the organization with the information that we have in front of us, which cannot always be shared. So it's interesting as a board, right? So people are like, I heard, I know you don't like this, I don't blah, 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 but they don't always have the information. So maybe one thing, and I'm sure you guys all say this, so I'm not saying you don't, I'm just saying one way is to say, one of our roles is to look at discriminatory treatment policies and practices within this organization. And we have more information to which you are not privy. I know we say, I can't discuss it, or I can't, or I know the back end, I think, Director Smith-Pose, you said something like, there's a back end thing of stuff, like, I think we just say, we have more information. You are not privy to the information for legal reasons. I understand that you are responding based upon what you've heard, what you thought, what you blah, 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 but here's our role. And I kind of want us all to be on message that this is our role. When we're addressing, because as we talk about being an anti-racist district, we need to be able to talk about, we're addressing this. Personal beliefs, this went back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, I could believe that you feel a certain way, or I feel like, that's personal, not my business. But the interpersonal, what we cannot do is have this type of interpersonal piece, because what we are doing here as a board is we're trying to do this. And I think that's really important to say to our constituents, right? So we want to continue to let people know this is our role, right? And then when we talk about anti-racist, this is why we define, right? It's unlearning and relearning. So what I find happens is that people are unclear when we say anti-racism. They're unclear. What exactly is race? That's going back to like old school training 101, knowing what race is and is not. Race is not cultural. I'm just gonna say it again. Race is not cultural. Race is the defining way that we in this country determine the caste system, determine the hierarchy based upon skin color. That's race. It is not based on cultural,
Mhm.
socioeconomic, cultural pieces, it can have an impact there. But in this country,
Mhm.
the way that we determine the rank of people in this world, the way that we subdivide people in this country
Mhm.
is by race.
Mhm.
And race is an artificial construct developed by skin color. In order to push against that, then we need to actively name, challenge, and work on disrupting and dismantling whiteness, which is the way in which all systems in this country have been developed. And I was gonna play a video, we'll do that next time, but every system in this country has been developed with the presumption of the superiority of white people.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And the way that you can look at that is you can look at every system and go, oh, how was this developed?
Mhm.
Right? Government, banking, education, housing, lending. Literally, every system built in this country was built on the notion of the superiority of white folks.
Mhm.
Therefore, to push against that is to name whiteness, white supremacy culture while fighting to dismantle and disrupt those things.
Mhm.
That's the work of anti-racism. It's unlearning and relearning, and it's really, really hard. And it's developed to wear you out
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
embedded,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
embedded
Embedded.
into the system.
into
Mhm.
the system, into
Mhm.
every system,
Mhm.
and it's developed to wear you out. The fatigue that you feel at the end of a board meeting is
Mhm.
purposeful.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? And that's why sometimes we make our jokes ourselves, sometimes we let it roll off our backs because it's unbelievably hard.
Mhm.
And I want to also say for those white folks who have chosen to be, I don't use the word allies, I don't use the word accomplice, I use co-conspirator because
Mhm.
we need folks
Mhm.
who are going to get in trouble with us.
Mhm.
It's also hard because they often are fighting against their own communities, their own families.
Mhm.
And they also have to unlearn and relearn. So I'm not just saying that for folks of color.
Mhm.
This is what your job is. This right here, and looking at how we are unlearning and relearning and naming whiteness.
So when we go into development of a board statement,
Yeah,
one of the key things that needs to be in there is what you just said. This is our job. That
yes,
our-
and I'm
uh-huh.
gonna, probably at 11, I'm gonna get there.
Okay.
We're on our way.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So for me, remember, because some people are like, well, I don't like anti-racism, I like equity. I don't like anti-racism, I want justice. Listen, you can't get to, anti-racism encompasses all of these things.
Mhm.
I can't get to equity without justice, and I can't get to justice and belonging without, like, all of these are gears.
Mhm.
They all move together to create this notion pushing against anti-racism.
Mhm.
I can't belong unless you see my race,
Mhm.
right? So I'm not gonna go join a country club. I can legally, but I won't belong there unless we're shifting those practices. Okay, I'm not gonna, we gotta go. So can somebody read this for me?
One either allows racial inequities to preserve as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe space of not racist. The claim of not racist neutrality is a mask for racism.
Kendi is like, yo, you can't just be in the middle.
Mhm. Mhm.
And as a board, this is so critically important because again, I just want to go back to your role, right? Your role is to interrogate these and to disrupt these within the institution. That's
Mhm.
your role as a board level. It's not the teacher's role,
Mhm.
it's your role.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it is, Kendi says there's no middle ground.
Mhm.
There's no safe space,
Mhm.
sorry,
Mhm.
where you just get to be like, I'm gonna be right here.
Mhm.
This is the racist stuff and this is anti-racist stuff, but this feels
Mhm.
comfortable.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be right here in the middle.
Mhm.
Kendi says there's no such thing as that.
Mhm. Mhm.
One is either allowing racial inequities to persevere as a racist
Mhm.
because you're allowing it, or
Mhm.
you're confronting it as an anti-racist. That's it. There's
Mhm.
only two options.
Mhm.
As a board,
Mhm.
either addressing racial policies and trying to disrupt them, or you're allowing them to continue because you hold the power of policy. When we say I'm not racist, it's a mask for racism. It's neutral.
Mhm.
I'm a good person. I'm not racist. No, but you're actually not doing anything to stop racism either.
Mm.
It's like you're sitting back eating popcorn and you watching it just.
You're like, you know what? This looks like it's bad. Let me go, do some money, spend some money about it, but I'm not gonna do anything.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're watching it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I've actually heard it, that you're on a moving walkway, when you go to the airport. I just
Yeah.
got back from New Orleans. So you're on this walkway and the walkway is you're just letting things happen. You know how some people walk on the walkway and some people pause right on the walkway? But Beverly Daniel Tatum says the only way that you're going to interrupt racism is absolutely to walk in the opposite direction. So the question is, where are you on the moving walkway? It's going like this. Are you allowing it? Are you watching it? Like, oh, that looks bad. Or are you actually doing something to disrupt? For sure. For sure. So since we talked about this, I took the liberty of taking the break to have a learning moment. So I didn't want you to think that I made this up. This is Carol Anderson's well-received book, a winner of all kinds of awards, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide, White Rage. The first time I read this, Carol Anderson is an auntie. I was like, auntie is bringing truth. And so here's her quote. The trigger for white rage, inevitably, is Black advancement. It's not the mere presence of Black people that's the problem. Rather, it is Blackness with ambition, with drive, with purpose, with aspirations, and with demands for full and equal citizenship. The trigger for white rage is Black ambition, drive, purpose, and aspiration. You have a majority Black board.
Yes.
Whether one member is with you or not. Right. You have a Black superintendent.
Yes.
You have a Black HR director.
Yes.
You have a Black CFO.
CBO, CAO,
And director of communication.
and Director of Communication.
The trigger for white rage is Black ambition, drive, and purpose. I see your hand. I want to let that marinate because that's hard to, you got to let that kind of sit. It's not the presence of Black people that's the trigger for white rage. Carol Anderson says it's when you have Black people with ambition, drive, purpose, aspirations. I would argue you got all that. I would also argue you're gonna have to figure out what your strategy is. We can no longer be surprised.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, I stopped you before. I just want to let it kind of.
Yeah. I would just kind of just go back in history of this district. Going way back, it was like that, because that board back then, way back then, was all white. It was all white. And so the superintendent, everybody. And they controlled everything of the narrative of everything what was going on in this district. So, when I look back, my father, my mom came through this district known as the Richmond Unified School District. And so you look at that back from the 40s, the 50s, right in there. And so Richmond was a segregated city. And El Cerrito, you definitely didn't have no Black people living in El Cerrito.
Right.
Back during that time. And so the makeup of this area, a lot of stuff was just covered up, but all the behaviors were still there.
Yeah.
It was just covered up.
Yeah.
And I think Trump released it. He released it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but it's been here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're doomed to repeat history if you don't understand history, so I appreciate that because you're doomed to repeat it. What I wanted to do is a lot of you had talked about, yes, a lot of you had talked about what is happening recently and how you deal with it. And I brought up Carol Anderson, and I need you to understand that this is well documented. And read the book, don't read the book, but create a strategy for what you know is gonna come. Yes.
I'm only laughing because I was just kind of looking over at Clerk Gonzalez Floyd, the president as well. I will say that I did start the reading late,
Yeah. Okay,
so I will admit that, but I have started the reading. And I just wanted to make that connection with what you were saying with white rage.
yep,
I was reading here just about the percentage of African-American teachers before Brown versus Board of
For sure.
Education.
yeah,
And there's this sentence in here that talks about before Brown, 35 to 50% of the teaching force was Black.
yes,
And then once Brown versus Board of Education came into play, that's when white rage
yeah,
came in
Yeah.
well. And you saw these policies
yes,
being implemented, including licensure procedures that really took away the Black force.
you must know your history.
Yeah.
Listen, the reason I suggested that book for you, and first of all, how much do you love Bettina Love? Okay.
Yes.
But she does a masterful job of connecting the policy with the impact
Yes,
of the policy, and then she gives you a story
yes,
of someone who was a student at that time. Masterful. And I'm about to get to that, so I'm gonna get, but I just, while you're at that, Brown v. Board of Education has been given to us as the savior, but we don't talk about the unintentional, intentional
Yeah.
pieces around that, right? And here's just a quick example. Principals. 90% of Black principals lost their jobs immediately
yes,
as a result.
yes.
Another impact, when did special needs start?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Special needs and special ed began after Brown v. Board of Ed.
Yes,
When Black children went to school with white teachers.
yes,
There was no special ed before that. And as a result of that, Black children were seen as unruly, discipline problems, having learning deficiencies, same Black children that Black teachers felt like we could teach in the community. Suddenly, these children need something else.
Yeah.
Don't, and so we put them away. Guess what else we do when we put people away? We put them in prisons.
yeah,
So it is a removal of the children who won't or don't fit in the boxes into a specialized need.
yeah,
And then that becomes a whole thing that follows them.
yes.
So there's so much there. That's why I was like, this board has got to
Yeah.
repunish for dreaming. We're getting to it. I'm gonna have to go faster. Okay, so listen, I talked about policies and procedures. This is what you're supposed to do. Kendi says there's no such thing as a non-racist or race-neutral policy. Every policy in every institution, in every community, and every nation is producing or sustaining racial inequity or equity between racial groups. Period, dot. I gave that to you last time. This is your role.
Yeah.
The role of the school board is to interrogate and disrupt racist policies, period.
Yeah.
That's the role. If you're trying to move towards an anti-racist district, if you remember, there's no neutrality. You're either allowing racist policies to continue, or you're interrupting and disrupting and interrogating racist policies. There is no neutrality. I would argue this is your role, this is your job.
Right.
And so, because you know that this is your job, we plan strategically for white rage. Okay, I'm gonna skip this. Here's punish for dreaming, but let me just go back to this. Because this is your role, I keep going, okay. Because this is your role, it's imperative that you get together as a group, and I must say also with your missing board members, and have this conversation. The role is not to, contrary to popular belief, your role is not to manage the staff. That's not your role. You hire somebody
Mhm,
and that person manages staff.
mhm,
That's not the role of any board, even in nonprofits.
mhm,
That board is supposed to work with the head person, the CEO, whatever,
mhm.
and then they advise sometimes, but they don't manage.
Mhm,
We need to know our role.
mhm,
Right.
mhm,
We all up in somebody's business. Why they doing that? That's not,
mhm,
Right.
that's not your role.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So with the other two board members that are missing, how do we do this? In closed session, or how do we do this?
I'm not sure when the six of you get together,
mhm,
but
How
it
do we
is
do it?
imperative
mhm.
that you have this conversation when you get together. If it's closed, if it's open, if I don't know why they're not here, and I don't know why they're allowed to not be here.
Mhm,
But what I know is you gotta get clear on your role. When I take a job,
mhm,
the first thing I do is lay out my deliverables.
mhm,
What is it you are holding me responsible for doing? And then I move to those deliverables, right? Everybody has a job, everybody understands that, that's what we do. Who gets in a job and then is like, I don't know what my role is, but I think it's gonna be this. We gotta be clear,
mhm, mhm,
right? So I don't know the answer to when, but
Yeah.
I know this is the conversation that must be had,
mhm,
for sure.
mhm.
All right, I'm gonna move quickly. So I asked you to read Punished for Dreaming. Bettina Love is awesome. I also think you can look, if you're not like into reading a whole book, I encourage you to look on YouTube. She's got tons and tons of stuff. She wrote this last year. Her previous text is We Want to Do More Than Survive, which was for teachers. This is now for people who are doing doing policy. It covers 4 decades of educational reform policy, which is critical for all of you. You need to know about Brown v. Board, A Nation at Risk, No Child Left Behind. You need to understand that. And I think sometimes as board members, not you guys, just in general, we don't understand policy.
Mhm,
And then we get into board leadership,
mhm,
but we don't understand, let me be clear, we don't understand educational policy.
mhm, mhm,
How did we get here?
mhm.
So incredibly important. And I love that she, again, as I said, she toggles between this policy review and then these personal stories. So you see the impact of the policy on young people. And then she ends with recommendations for improvement, which I'm gonna tell you is gonna be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can get there. But that's, at least she offers that, okay? So here's a couple of quotes that I just want to give you. Anti-Blackness, the steadfast refusal to see Black people as fully human, manifests in the belief that Black people need fixing due to inherent negative qualities. So she makes the argument that policy, board educational policy, because that's what she's talking about here, is a result of the need to fix particularly Black students.
Mhm.
That's that special ed that I talked
Mhm.
about. It is like, I don't think there's something inherently wrong with Rochelle. She needs to be fixed. Let me make a policy,
Mhm.
right? And that's what that happens. Here's another one. White supremacy and capitalism work in unison, even in education.
Mm.
It's beyond a pipeline of corruption. It's a deliberate, massive, intentional, and profitable mechanism for the educational death of Black children. She makes a really strong argument that prior to Brown v. Board of Education,
Mhm.
there was a middle class. There were a group of very, very well-educated folks educating their own children. After Brown v. Board of Education, she makes the argument that there have been continual policies all meant to design what she calls the educational death of Black children, and certainly meant to determine that Black children were not as smart as, right? Because we understand the difference when we talk about gaps in testing. Everything is about white children and everybody else here.
Mm.
That's what testing is about, right? Do we understand that?
Mhm.
When we talk about, oh, what are our test scores? It's how do they get as high as these folks right here,
Mhm.
which are white children?
Mhm.
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 And so for her, she makes this argument that this is deliberative. This is deliberate. It's massive. It's intentional and it's profitable.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so those of us who are still in public ed have to understand policy. And you
Mhm.
guys are bored. You gotta
Mhm.
understand it. It's so incredibly necessary. So I figured that you probably hadn't done a lot of the reading, so I want to just give you this quick thing. I would love the next time I meet with you that you have covered chapters like 3 through 6.
Mhm.
But really, really quickly, she sets the tone. She tells the story of Zakia, who was a young woman called Zook, who was playing basketball, and her troubles as she, was matriculating through school, that she saw that as a cautionary tale and tried not to do. So I think she, meaning the author, Bettina Love. But it's interesting because the way in which Zakiya was treated, was very indicative of how several other folks were treated in public schools.
Mm.
Then, chapter 1 talks about Brown v. Board, the notion of white flight, and Black children placed in classrooms with white teachers. And then chapter 2, right after this, y'all, right after Black children are placed in classrooms, suddenly they're at risk.
And I heard that over the years, at risk.
Absolutely,
At risk.
because the Nation at Risk report came out right here. This is, all right, so, all right, I'm yelling.
No, you
But
preach
it's
it.
like, because it's when I was like, oh my gosh, and not only I heard it, but I remember, I'm a certain age, I remember the 70s when everything was at risk. Because this Nation at Risk report came out. You've got to see these connections,
Yeah.
right? So that's a quick overview of chapters 1 and 2. If you get that far, when next I meet with you, okay, but I would love for you to get to chapter 6. All right, last, crime reform and education reform merged.
Yes.
So this is what happens. First, a Brown v. Board, lose our Black schools, integration, horrible for Black children. White flight, we're not gonna go to school with these Black children. So then they go to suburbs and create their own schools, right? And so then we're left with those who choose to work in, public schools. And then suddenly Black children are at risk. And then suddenly we need to create these things to deal with at risk. And then while we're at risk, there's this notion of criminal behavior. And so particularly Bush and others are like, we're gonna be hard on crime. We gotta be hard on crime. I'm the president that's hard on crime. And you still hear that now. That's why this is so crazy. You still hear that now as we're going in a presidential election. But anyway, so the crime that our nation talked about merged with education reform. Because who was doing the crime? All right. So crime reform, education reform merged, and then that's where we created the achievement gap, right? Which was another way to say we'll never be as smart as white kids. And it's because of crime. So we need to manage this group of children to stop them from doing the crime that we see them doing, but we never ever talked about really the other types of crime that was already happening. And this is why we refer to education as this carceral education experience. And that's why we talk about school to prison pipeline, because crime and education merged. And this is all in policy, right? So I was gonna ask you which quote resonates. We don't have time to do that. However, I wanna pause here. I'm asking you to read Punished for Dreaming. I'm gonna ask our teachers that I work with to read this lovely book that just came out by Tiffany Jewell, which is entitled Everything I Need to Learn About Racism I Learned in School. And so I'm looking for things that are gonna it speaks to school experience. And when you read that after reading Punished for Dreaming, it's terrifying. And so what Tiffany Jewell does is she includes like the different layer from this. So Bettina says, here's policy, here's an example. And Tiffany says, here are the people I grew up with. Here are their stories. And she has a wide range of folks of color telling their stories, microaggressions, macroaggressions, and the ways that school was horrible for them. And I bet if we think that, and if we had time, if we were not in public, and if we were somewhere else and we were walking through a wooded area, I bet we all have examples of stories where schools could have been, would have been, or were damaging spaces for us. And so we have a moral imperative to advocate for those who don't have a voice through policy, to not continue to allow our schools to be spaces of harm. My mom did the very best she could. She sent me to Chabot Elementary, which back then and now, is seen as a very, very white school in Oakland. It's an elementary school in the hills of Oakland. And we just happen to live in that area. Really, really far down from everybody else though, like on the outskirts, like as far away as we could get from the school. And Mom was like, you're gonna go to this school. And I have photos. I have my memories, but I decided recently to look back at those photos and to see me as the little chocolate chip in the snow. And I remember harm. We didn't call it harm then, right? I just went home and was like, Mommy, how come? How come they said I was this? How come they said I was that? How come they said I looked like this? How come they said my skin was ugly? How come? Baby, don't worry about it. You know, my mother is a woman of faith, so she was like, God's got you. You go ahead and do what you need to do. Be strong. How come I had to be strong at 7? Like, how come I couldn't just be a kid
Right.
and couldn't just enjoy being at school like everybody else? When they asked me, how come your hair isn't in a ponytail? How come you can't write? It was a lot of harm that I didn't know that I internalized until I got old enough to study and understand the internalization. Well, imagine I then got good at school. I figured out what they were looking for and I figured out how to play the game. And so then I started to do well because I figured it out. But for many students who don't figure it out, your role is to create space so they don't have to figure it out.
Wow, wow, wow.
I'm gonna get Dr. Hurston. Then
Oh,
you.
okay. Yeah, as you were talking, I was just thinking about just a couple of my experiences. I'm much older than my bosses here, so I have different experiences. I remember when they were busing Black kids to the white schools. I was part of the integration. And my wife, even though we're the same age, she has a different experience than I have. Because I was part of a military family. She stayed in the South, born and raised in the South. But I remember living in Greenville, South Carolina, getting on the bus, and we were going to Tanglewood, which was an all-white school, so we were integrated. And I remember being let off the bus and going to the class, and it was lunchtime. And they made all the Black kids wait in the line. All the white kids got to eat first. I remember this clearly. I didn't understand it, but I remember staying in the line with the Black kids. And then, once all the white kids ate, they were allowed to leave. And then when we got our trays, the Black kids went to the line, sat at a table by ourselves, and ate lunch. And I didn't understand it then. And I remember when I was reading earlier today, the introduction, I was thinking, wow, this is me, how she talked about, I can't remember from my K-12 experience, one adult, one teacher saying that I could be someone, that I could do something. Even when I went to the counselor's office, it was really about like a lower track that you could do. If it wasn't for my mom and my dad that poured into me and told me I could do and be anything, if it was left for the educational system, so there was definitely, and my wife's experience, she actually remembers doing integration that not only did she have that experience of standing in Black line, but she also remembers the colored water fountains. So even when they were integrating, she could still not drink out of certain water fountains.
Yeah, I see. The caste system, Isabel Wilkerson talks about the 8 elements of caste, one of which is this notion of purity and how there has to be this separation so that we can keep this pure for certain people. We see that in water fountains, we see that in lunchrooms, we see that in lines, sections, right? That's part of our caste system. And what's powerful for me is your experience and mine seem very similar, because if it had not been for my mom, I'd also been like, that's not who you are. But for every one of me, I saw so many who didn't have that at home, or also couldn't figure it out, and were tracked to the death of, educational death of other children. I'm gonna get you, and then I haven't forgotten you either.
Yeah, I mean, first, thank you for sharing. this.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was supposed to say
Always-
that.
I don't know, it's okay. I think that, it's always really good for me to hear that, especially because I have never gone through the Black experience,
Mhm.
right, in education, so I love hearing those stories, even though there can be people, so thank you. I think that I read, Miseducated by Brandon Fleming.
Mm.
I don't know what's
Mhm.
piece about it, and when I read that, it actually triggered a lot of memories for me of my experience of coming into the US system when I moved to the United States. And you guys know my story, so I've mentioned it many times, but like when I moved to the United States, I moved to this white town in San Diego, Encinitas, which the person knows very well. And because I didn't speak much English, the district didn't really have systems to support kids like me. So they put me into special ed, which reminded me a little bit of what we were sharing earlier. And it really took me, 15 years to rationalize how that affected me. Because, I truly didn't need the tools that are given to someone doing a special ed program, right? Or, like, especially because I was put into ISD class, which is like
Wow.
kids with like high needs, right? I think like what that did to me, someone, I mean, it was never like a true student, but like, I was like a B student, because I was very social in Mexico. But like what that did to me and how like that experience painted my life for the next decade, right? And so I think that like both your experiences you've shared like really remind me a little bit of that, and I constantly forget, right? That like we gotta remember to bring in our experiences to this world.
We all been affected by these different experiences.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the immigrant experience, particularly this notion of you don't speak one language, so that automatically means that you are not as intelligent, is so dehumanizing and so demoralizing. And I thank you for sharing that, because I wasn't aware of that. But I definitely have really serious stories, particularly of two friends of mine who were immigrants to this country, whose parents were like physicians or at some level in their home country. And as they came here, the lack of speaking English became the piece that made someone else in the dominant caste feel like, oh, this person is not as, it's that lack of humanity again. And because the resources weren't in that particular school district, there was an automatic, let me move you over here. Let me not find out. Let me not get someone who can interpret, but rather let me make an assumption, right? Which is what happens when the dominant caste says, you are othered.
But you're totally right. I think that I constantly use the excuse of like, and I say it in my story, I'm like, oh, they didn't have the resources. But like, I'm giving them an out
Yeah,
by saying they didn't have the resources,
Yeah.
right? Like they have the resources.
they
They
chose
were
not
a
to spend
very
them.
white, rich district,
Mm.
right? And like, we even have, with the lack of resources, I would say that we have the resources to potentially provide supports. And I think they chose,
Yes,
and through policy,
yes,
to not provide those resources.
yes.
right?
And through
So-
priority.
and
Yeah.
through-
You were not a priority. And I think that it's funny that in this country, when we do the cast of color,
Yes,
we also do the cast of language. If I speak Italian in English, I'm brilliant. If I speak
Yes.
German in English, I'm brilliant. If I
Yes.
speak this and this, I'm brilliant. But if I speak Spanish
yes.
in English, then I'm othered.
Well,
Or
the-
I'm not as valued, or it's not as amazing to be bilingual if Spanish is part of the bilingualism, right? But if Italian or German or French
But
or.
because those are from the history, right? And don't get me started on history lessons, but when this country was founded in
Yeah.
colonial Virginia,
Yes,
there was a notion of who we were was part of our cultural. If you
Yes.
spoke Italian,
yes,
if you were from Italy, right? If you're from Italy, I
Yes.
speak Italian, right? If you're from France, I speak French.
Mhm.
But all of those folks
mhm,
had a skin tone
right,
that
right.
was lumped into what we call white.
yes,
And the
Yes.
first time you see white in policy is
Right.
after Bacon's Rebellion,
yes,
when Black folks, white folks, indigenous folks all were like, we're going to fight against the elite.
mhm,
And the elite said, oh, we're not going to have this.
Mhm.
And that's where divide and conquer first
Yeah,
came.
yeah.
How do we move those people away from mixing with particularly indigenous
Mhm.
and Africans who were not yet enslaved, right?
Mm.
And what happened was we then created
Mhm.
this notion of white.
Mm.
And so Italian,
Yeah.
German,
Yeah.
French has a skin tone
yes, yes,
that was put in this category
Yeah.
over here. And that's why those languages are not seen
Yeah.
as valuable as Spanish, because to your point, that also comes with a different skin tone.
right.
This is insidious stuff, right? And I could go on and on. I have a lot of things around it. I know we have limited time, but when we really want to talk about, I think I mentioned to you, Dr. Hurst, I haven't really had the conversation with anyone in WCC USD about where whiteness came from and how whiteness happened, because it's triggering
Yes,
and it requires time and safety. But when we're ready to have that training,
yes, yes,
it is necessary to understand exactly what we're against. And it's much, much deeper than one person getting angry.
It's also interesting
So-
because my experience versus you guys' experience is geographical.
Yeah.
I grew up born and raised in the South,
Mhm.
born and reared in Alabama. So when I'm walking to school, I'm walking past trees that I know my ancestors hung from. So my understanding of who I am and who I had to be and where I was, the street lights coming on for us was more than just an antidote. It was a safety precaution. Knowing how to drive through a town and what town to go through and make sure you have enough gas to get
Mhm.
through that town because you could not stop
Mm.
was a way of preserving your life. So these are
Mm.
lessons that I had to learn at 6, 7,
Mm.
8 years old. You don't walk anywhere by yourself because you may not come home. You don't go we had certain routes that we could trick or treat. Because if you go up that street and you knock on that door, you're gonna be met with a shotgun. And that person would get off from shooting you. They shoot you, you died, you invaded their property. You take very seriously signs that say no trespassing, because what they mean is you better not be Black and come on my property. So my experience coming here was having to learn your racism. Because your racism in California is very microaggressive. Your racism in California is very tailored with economics and zip code. And they had to learn that all white supremacist policy is not run by white people. That was very different for me than growing up in the South with the Bull Connors and the understanding of the KKK. And Martin Luther King Day was also David Duke Day in school. So you knew that that was going to be a day that fights were going to break out. You just knew it, right? So coming here and learning racism and relearning that racism looks different but has the same impact has been a very opening experience for me. I'm complete.
There's the beauty in this, in the sharing of our stories and the understanding of the ways in which dominant culture has an impact on our schools is critically important for us as board members. And how we model this for our leadership, for our principals, for our schools, can really make the difference in understanding. But I also want to say that for those who deny, resist, who are saying that, yeah, that was then, but
Mhm.
it's not now.
Mhm,
It's also about us making the connection
mhm,
to what we see happening in our schools every day.
mhm, mhm,
And that's why the student summit
mhm,
was so incredibly
Mhm.
powerful, and
mhm,
to continue to have student summits
mhm,
where we have our children today
mhm, mhm,
saying, yeah, I know which teacher to go to.
mhm, mhm,
I
mhm,
know where I can go. I know what I can
mhm,
say
mhm,
today,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And so I think we have to share our stories, but then for the people who don't believe them,
Mhm,
we've got to get the word out of that. Our students are like, no, no,
mhm.
this today,
Yeah.
this very moment.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, thank you so much. And I never have enough time with you. I feel like every time I come, I never have enough time. I'm going to allow you to do some work now.
Okay.
I've been asked to prepare 4 statements
Mhm,
that school boards are working with. 2 are school boards that I've personally worked with to help them craft,
mhm,
and 2 are others that I know. I'm not going to tell you which 2.
mhm.
And they are in no particular order, so I don't want you to think that. But I have made a copy for each of you. I also put it on the deck.
Mhm,
And what I want you to do is, I don't think you will have a chance to wordsmith this to death.
Okay.
But I do think you'll have an opportunity to look at all 4 of them and at least be like, I like this piece, I like this piece, I don't like this piece. I want to put this together. And I think that you will be able to do that. So what I would suggest is that you take a moment to read through each one of them and maybe mark it up with a pen and be like, circle or highlight, or this is the part I like, or whatever.
Mhm,
So 4 statements, choose one,
mhm,
and then I would suggest not to wordsmith it today.
mhm,
But when you come back together, you're gonna take time to wordsmith, but just try to get close to
mhm,
the elements of the ones you want. I'm not gonna read these to you because they're in front of you. What I will say is I've changed all of them to say WCC USD,
mhm,
so I feel like it's coming from you.
mhm,
All right, so statement 1 is long. Statement 2 is much, much shorter.
mhm,
Statement 3, where is statement 3? Yeah, it's in the middle of long and short.
mhm,
Hmm.
mhm.
I love myself. All right. And the statement 4 is like, this is what we got, right? And so I think it's necessary that you see those. I'm gonna give you, it's 11, almost 11:20.
Mhm,
I'm gonna give you until 11:35,
mhm,
and then let's start having this conversation. It's not gonna finish today.
mhm.
Yes,
I was
sir.
gonna ask, is any way that we can put together like an affirmation, based on this and based on everything, like for even us as a board and the schools, will say each morning and how we value each other,
Mhm.
kind of worded in a way,
I can definitely work on that.
yeah, because I think that affirmation means a lot because you saying it every day. Because I have a personal affirmation I get up every morning. I say, but mine is religious.
No, I hear you.
Mine is
I can work
religious.
on that.
Yeah.
I can definitely work on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely put that together.
Cool.
All right, we will come back in 15. See what you like about these. I'm not gonna tell you which ones I get.
of us started out very slow, and we had to read, so I think reading strategy, they had to teach people who didn't know how to read, how to do it. It's school.
Oh.
You know that thing 3 or 4 times. I think that we could actually develop one based on what. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Fran, you're so bad. Sorry. I was talking and you're still working. Go ahead and still work. I'm that bad student in the room. That when I'm finished, I'm like, everybody finished. I need to look, I need to look at it. Yeah. I see why I didn't.
I know it's only 11:30, but I feel like if you guys are done, I'm happy to, I'm not going to facilitate conversation. Oh, okay, need a little more time. I was talking to Carmen, so. Okay, what I'd love to do is have a conversation about where we land. Oh, let me get my phone.
He's, well, we can go ahead, he's just taking a little walk around because of this meeting. Yeah, no.
Okay, what was looking good there?
I liked parts of all,
Me too,
Yes.
Me too.
and I hated parts of some.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Who wants
Can
to
we
go fir-
start
okay.
with the number one?
Yeah.
So I absolutely love the first paragraph.
Mhm.
I absolutely love the second paragraph.
Mhm.
And those are the two that I really love in number one. The first paragraph and the second paragraph, I really love in number one.
Can
the
we
way
pause
it's-
for a
the
moment?
way
How-
it's here.
Yeah, the number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
One thing.
oh, yeah, because I don't have it like,
Yeah.
yeah, it made it easier to read. I had to fit it on a board, so we'll just move away from this. So, let's just go up to policies. How, yeah, and how about,
Say
yeah,
what I liked about it.
what you liked about
Um,
paragraphs 1 and 2?
I think paragraph one, the West Contra Costa School District Board of Education is committed to the work of anti-racism. Love the word committed. To carry WCCUSD education into the future, we recognize that we must continually renew and reflect on the roots of racism and develop new ideas to meet the times. Racism, explicit or implicit, stands in direct conflict to the fundamental principles of WCCUSD education. I like alliteration, so all the Cs in there I thought was good. I like that it was very, this is what we have to do. This is if then. If we do this, then this is going to happen. This is what we are charged to do. It was a recognizing of this is what we know. This is the current reality that we're in. This is what we have to do to move past that. And it's a continual thing. It's not just gonna happen with this board. The board after us have to still be
Interesting.
continuing this work. And then the second one, unjust ideas and policies and the racial inequity they produce have shaped us, our schools and our society. We're naming it and we are not running from what it is. We know this and we're saying it. And then we're saying it's our responsibility as a board to identify and dismantle racist ideas and inequitable policies in ourselves and across the district. I like these two statements because any principal, any teacher, any parent can point to, I'm coming to you because this didn't happen. This is not happening at my school site. This is not happening with my child. And you said that this is the policy and this is what you believe to be true. So then I expect you to do something about it. I want something that people on the furthest part away from us can point to and says, but that's what you told me you were gonna do. Because it keeps us accountable. And that's why I like paragraph one and paragraph two of statement number one. I'm complete.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, I think that the part that I liked the most was the second paragraph, the second sentence.
Oh,
'Cause I feel like it's just so direct about what we want to do, right? And I actually liked one word that I kind of saw within a lot of the rest, but I like that it's stated, the word accountability on the last paragraph. I didn't particularly like the paragraph, but I like that they purposely say, and I don't even like that sentence. So I just circled the word accountability because I feel like that sentence is kind of like it's not as direct of what we think about accountability per se. But I like that they call out, like, we are going to, like, it reminds me of like the third one, which is my favorite.
Okay.
Because I think that in that one, whoever wrote it, they are trying to take personal accountability of their work and the work of others, right? So then that's why I like that word, because I feel like we do have to have it of like, it's our responsibility, and we need to hold the system accountable and each other accountable as well. So, thanks.
I love that. What about you, Dr. Harris? How do you feel about number one?
Number one, certainly, I put the how, I put committed as well, and circled that, because it starts off with a strong statement of what we're committed to. Then follows up with, the how to carry this out. We must, and that's action, so action that the board is gonna take.
I love it.
And then it went into what we will not tolerate.
Mhm,
So racism, explicit or implicit, stand in direct conflict.
mhm,
So I really like that first paragraph.
mhm,
And then the second paragraph, I like it as well, because it goes into our responsibility, so it puts responsibility on the board,
mhm,
and share some history as well. And I also highlighted, well, put an underline under accountability. So I really like that term. What I wish they would have done more of is describe how the board will hold each other accountable. Because I've shared this with board as well. Even when it comes to the governance handbook, we spent a lot of time, a couple of years
mhm.
on that document, but what is lacking is, here's how we're gonna hold each other accountable.
I see. That's super good feedback.
Mhm.
And when we do hold
I
each other
love that.
accountable, we get nothing but pushback,
Right.
right? So we hold each other accountable. To your point of, what do you do to the two members who aren't here?
Right.
How does this board hold them accountable?
This is really good. I'm
And
getting
how
these
do
notes.
we continue to move past with the understanding, if there's pushback, well, you didn't show up.
Right.
You wasn't here to give your feedback and your input and to have this conversation. This is where we have the conversation. So when this statement comes to the board for a vote, it can't be a whole lot of let's rework it. We've already worked it.
Mhm.
So if you don't agree with it, then your vote should be no.
Mm.
But this is where the work happens. This is what we're doing now. So to me, that was one of the things that, as a way of holding each other accountable, is we don't go back and re-litigate.
Yep.
The work is done here.
Mhm.
I'm complete.
So maybe, yeah, maybe putting that in. This is such good feedback for me.
Mhm.
I mean, for all the districts. This is really helpful. So far, what we have is that number one, paragraphs 1 and 2
Mhm.
seem that we can move forward.
With
And then we
the
have a question of accountability
Yep.
and how that looks.
Yep.
What about school board statement 2? Anybody like that?
I love both paragraphs in statement 2, but that was just me. I
Mhm.
love both paragraphs in statement 2, but I am a history and an English teacher. This,
Understood.
number 2, was the thought-provoking one that says, let's fight.
It doesn't
Let's-
say
I
that.
feel like-
These are really good
feel like
feedback
this
for
is,
me.
Janelle, like, I feel like the second one, like,
Mhm.
I could hear you
Uh-huh,
through the second
uh-huh,
paragraph,
uh-huh,
which is funny.
uh-huh.
Like,
Right.
we will do better. I've heard you say
Uh-huh.
that. I like underlined it.
Mhm.
And I like that they recognize the problem. Like,
Mhm.
they specifically call out that we have a problem,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
With like fancier, more
Mhm.
beautiful wording.
mhm.
And in the first one, I like that they specifically call out African-American children,
Mhm, mhm.
right? Which we try not to do because, you know, there's
Yeah.
always words about inclusivity.
Absolutely.
All that, and I think that one of the
Absolutely.
things that I learned in the first session of
Mhm,
Uh-huh.
about the importance of calling out
mhm,
is that instead of trying to like put the bar at white children,
mhm.
Yeah.
white, like the bar should be about like how do we support, you know, African American students specifically who are the most marginalized. And I think that if we don't call it out, then we're not doing
Mhm.
service to what we're trying to ultimately achieve.
Mhm.
So anyways, that's really, I think, the two parts that I like, but like the recognition of it, and then also of both African American children and the problem that we're trying to fight.
Mhm.
But I still felt like number 2 was missing certain pieces.
Yes.
for me,
Yes.
right? Like, I
Absolutely.
feel like it was the start of a
Mhm.
really good statement.
Yep, and they
right?
just
It's
left
like,
it
where are the
there.
next two berries,
I
right?
mean,
Like, I
yeah.
felt like number 3 was like, great, that's what I was missing, right? Like, almost like.
That's why I like putting
Absolutely.
them together, putting a little bit of both of it together. What I
Well, that's
really,
why, yeah,
that it's like this, so we can, cut and paste a little bit
absolutely.
to our pleasure.
And I can send them to you so you can literally cut
Right,
and paste.
so I,
Dr. Hurst,
Uh-huh.
I
was gonna say
bet
the
I
same
know
thing.
what you're gonna say. They left out what they gonna do about it,
Mhm.
right?
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so.
I already know.
I agree with both of
Mhm.
you, but it just feels like it's missing something. We are uniquely positioned to shift these outcomes.
Yeah, how we gonna do that?
That's great.
Yeah.
Right,
But
yeah,
how-
yeah.
So what I put down here is it doesn't describe the actual work. So there's
Yes.
one line here as a board, we said go, so that's on CSBA's website.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
that's
mhm.
something that I've seen before.
Mhm.
What
Interesting.
I thought was powerful is in your slide, you talked about the role of the school board to interrogate, disrupt,
Mhm,
racist
mhm,
policy.
mhm.
So I would think that that needs to be.
Yes.
revised.
Yeah,
And then I'm big on how are we
How we
gonna
gonna
hold each
do
other
it?
accountable?
Yeah.
yeah.
What are we gonna do and how are we gonna know that we've done it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is one from a school that has majority, like 87% African-American children.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they definitely,
Yeah.
you know, it would have been weird if they
Yeah.
hadn't
Right.
said
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I do like when it says we are uniquely
Yes.
positioned because
We are.
currently, we are uniquely
For sure.
positioned
Yes.
to make changes
Yeah.
because we have it's funny because when people think something
Hmm.
is nasty, it's really good.
Mhm.
So when the email came out and said, you have a mostly minority board. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We do. And we represent what our district looks
Well,
like.
that's what I was gonna say.
We-
The way
we
that
are
you
the
hit that
representation.
is, so what's the demographic of the district?
Right.
Mhm.
And we're
Right.
trying to be representative of that. That,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be, you know.
It doesn't have to be, what they intended it to be,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but yet if we can't shift things,
Well,
then when will it shift? It didn't shift for 400 years
Mhm.
and then 200 years of education, and then it hasn't shifted then.
Mhm.
So, sir, changing it to what you wanted is that trope of make it great again for you.
Mm.
The fear is that we're making it great for everybody with the intentionality of starting with the most marginalized, the most harmed, the most disregarded and disrespected.
mhm.
That's where your fear, again, if you always are expected to have 100% and we give you 98, you feel oppressed
Mhm.
and you're not. So I think that that's the part that if we can keep uniquely positioned,
Mhm.
it holds us to that level of accountability.
Yeah.
Because that unique position may not always be retained. And the more that we push the system, the more likely it's not going to be because they're gonna push back hard.
Mhm.
I'm complete.
I'm just giving all kind of feedback. This is amazing. And feel free to jump in on any of these. What about school board statement number 3?
This one was my favorite.
Oh, good. I mean, okay.
And I was hoping that, I was hoping that you would have written it, and I felt like you did, obviously. I mean, I like the
Right, because it was the
incorporation.
history in it, right? That's what,
Yes,
yeah, I
yes.
know.
I mean, I like the incorporation and the acknowledgement of the history,
Mhm.
right? I felt like this whole, statement had very active language
Mm.
of like
Mhm.
what is going to occur.
Mhm.
Like, I really like that second sentence on the first paragraph.
Mhm.
We will support anti-racist policies,
Mhm.
programs, and
Mhm.
practices, like
Mhm.
calling it out. I really liked the first sentence in the second paragraph, don't really know that,
Mhm.
how like it calls out them as individuals and as board members,
Mhm.
right? Because being
Oh.
anti-racist
Definitely.
shouldn't just be about me
Yeah.
sitting on the dais,
Right.
right? Like, especially if I fit in that position, it's not like we just like, oh, I'm leaving the seat,
Mhm.
so I'm not a board
Mhm.
member, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
we gotta continue to do that even if we're not at a board meeting.
Mhm.
Because we also have a huge effect outside of the board meetings,
Absolutely.
right? When we go visit schools,
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
and I like the acknowledgement of the paragraph.
Mhm.
I thought that's really powerful.
I think to your point, we have board members who are bobbleheads on the board. But then there's spoons outside and they just like to stir it up.
Mhm.
And then the old adage, throw the rock, hide the hand, right? So I think that it is good that we strive to uncover unconscious biases and practices, anti-racism as individuals and as board members. I thought that was very powerful. I liked the first paragraph in number 3, and I liked the second paragraph in number 3.
Mhm.
I actually liked all of number 3. Number 3, I think, was very Eminem. It was Malcolm and Martin, right? It was very, this is the system and this is how we work inside this system, but we're consciously working in this system to disband and dismantle and to recognize and to call out and to, it was very action oriented. This is what we're doing. So I thought that was powerful. I'm complete.
I really like number 3 as well. I like the language shared as well. Commits to anti-racism, that goes right into like the definition as well. Active effort to identify. What I really liked in paragraph number 2 was what you were sharing about sort of your journey from Mexico to the United States, and it talked about persisting through discomfort. And for me, that's an acknowledgement to the board that we have to have like these uncomfortable conversations. So putting it in writing, let the public know that there's gonna be some uncomfortable conversations in the future.
Yeah.
We're gonna challenge everything.
Can I just say, number 4 was my Malcolm.
Was your
I
mouth? Okay.
love number 4. I would just say everything about it is great. Leave it, mark it, publish it, print it.
Mhm.
Like, I love number 4. I love number 4 because it says we denounce racism,
Mhm.
bullying, discrimination, white supremacy, hate, racial inequality in any form within our school community. You can't call a kid a monkey.
Mhm.
You can't say that I own you. And these are things that I've heard in elementary schools. You can't sit here and weaponize language. We are not tolerating that. We denounce that. We do not accept that. And then it says, furthermore, WCCUSD will not tolerate the values, the structures, and behaviors that perpetuate this system.
Yeah.
That to me, anybody can point to. My child got called a monkey. The child who called my child a monkey had zero discipline to it, but you told me
Mhm.
in your language that you will not tolerate the values and instructions, behaviors that perpetuate racism, not doing anything about a child that called my child a monkey is going directly against what you said that you stood for. As a parent, I could point to that. As a student, I could point to that. And then it says each member of our school board individually and collectively is responsible for creating and nurturing an anti-racist learning environment. Same thing, I can point to that. You are not doing your job individually or collectively because there's racialized harm. I would love to see that word somewhere in here, that phrase somewhere in here, racialized harm, right? The terror that our Black children go through at sites, because it's terror that they go through. The anxiety that's built when you have to sit in a class and you're afraid someone's going to touch your hair or rip off your hijab or do something or say something nasty that because you speak in a second language.
Mhm.
That's what our children are going through.
Absolutely.
Having to sit in a history class, knowing that if you're talking about slavery, you're gonna be called on every day and twice on Sunday.
Absolutely.
And just to add to what you're saying, you know, when I was here, you know, as a safety staff, kids used to storm out of class. And the word I used to hear, oh, she's racist, man. She's racist.
Mhm.
Christian, she's racist.
Mhm.
She said this and did that.
Mhm.
And I heard that all through my, you know, duration of working here at this site,
Mhm.
Wow.
And every week was something that a kid was storming out of class. Oh,
Mhm.
she's racist.
Wow.
And so just to add to your.
I'm taking some notes. What did you say you would love to see added?
The
Racialized
phrase
harm.
racialized
Oh.
harm.
Okay.
Something about the terror that actually happens. Speaking to the terror that our children have to sit through because it's terror. It's when we always talk about social emotional, but we don't name that part of that is the terrorism that happens through weaponized language.
And they would show the movie
Radicalized
Roots.
harm.
Right.
And they did that here. They showed the movie Roots. And so imagine being a Black kid in class and Roots being shown.
Well, the unsafe environment that's created through a lack of cultural competency. The
Absolutely.
unsafe environment that's created through the lack of giving kids language to express how they feel. The lack of providing policy and words that parents can point to that we can then hold people in the system accountable to.
Yeah.
I think that our job as the governance team is to provide the policy, the procedures, and the language to hold everyone accountability. It's protective policy to hold everyone accountable. And then to go to whomever we have to go to and whatever comes from that and whatever backlash comes and says, but yes, you don't have to work here. But if you choose to work here, this is what working here looks like.
I think it starts with when we hire. So it's both, and I have a lot of ideas, you know, I have ideas.
Mhm.
I have ideas about how we socialize current people, but
Mhm.
also when we hire,
Mhm.
there has to be something around, this is what we're moving towards and this is what we're looking for and this is how we act.
Right.
I'm gonna move us, what I have is paragraphs 1 and 2 on 1.
I just make one.
I know you thought that, four didn't say anything about how. I already know.
Right, that, but also I just want to add to what you were saying, ma'am. I think it needs to move from, this conversation that we're having equity statement for the board to. Know what we have.
Yes,
You're not gonna hold me accountable for,
yes,
unless it's a policy.
yes.
If it's not, if it's in the government's handbook, I'm not gonna necessarily be held accountable for it.
Mhm, mhm.
So that would be my only thing. And then how do we socialize?
Oh, yeah.
This as well.
Yeah, I've got lots of ideas about how we socialize it, but I want to move back. If it's policy,
If it's policy, they can be held. accountable.
yes, okay,
Yes.
I was like, maybe, I want to make sure I heard
Yes.
that. So, number one, we're looking at paragraphs 1 and 2.
Love them.
Number 2, we like some things on 2 because it's a statement, but can we, in the interest of trying to narrow, can we say that we like 3 better than 2 or no?
I like 3 better than 2, but I do like the sentence, we are uniquely positioned to shift these outcomes.
Okay, we are uniquely, so that last sentence there on 2. So if we added that and somebody liked, we will do better. Are we? No.
I
It
think that
just,
I just like
it
that.
sounded
They
like,
remind
but
me
yeah.
of-
Okay, so if we add, we are uniquely positioned to 3.
Yeah.
Is there something we don't like about 3? I'm just trying to help us narrow.
I mean, maybe this is just me. Please push back on this. I don't think we maybe necessarily. Well, no, never mind.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
I
Which
think the historical paragraph, the 3rd paragraph.
Yes.
I was thinking the same
So
thing.
I think that I don't mind it.
Yes.
I don't mind it,
Don't mind it,
but we don't have to have
Yeah, I
it.
like it.
I like it,
right?
but we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have to
it's
have it.
right.
But people call me Petty LaBelle. So there's parts of it that I would have just kept it just
Yeah.
because, but we don't have to have it.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is that paragraph 3, which of course is all about the history, is maybe not necessary. So I'm gonna put question mark on that. All right. But so for 2, we're done with 2.
I think so.
Cool. And so far we have 2 paragraphs on 1
Mhm.
and at least the first 2 paragraphs on 3.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay. And then we're gonna add, we are uniquely positioned to shift these outcomes.
yeah.
So for 4, is there anything we want to keep from 4?
I like 4, but I can use 4 in my closing comments. I'll just see this. Because this is great. But I like 4, but if no one else has a feeling to move towards anything in 4.
I
I'm
mean, do
okay
you
with
feel
that.
like what's been said in 3 also has
It
been
does-
said in
It
4?
does cover it.
Yeah.
It covers it with a different kind of
Correct.
a way of saying it, but I'm okay because I think that the overall picture is
Is captured.
Yeah.
Can I say though, I would love to see the second paragraph of 4 be added onto the second paragraph in 3.
Take it.
Mm.
I like
Okay.
it.
Because this one
Yeah.
is also about individual
Mhm,
accountability,
mhm.
right? And that's, I think, what's missing for me on the
Mm.
second paragraph of 3.
Okay. I like it.
So what I have so far, 3 is obviously one of the ones that we really like. And so I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
So, first 2 paragraphs of 3, we're gonna add uniquely positioned. And then we're gonna take this last paragraph from 4 because it says individually and collectively. And you know what?
Mhm.
That's really good feedback. I look at that and I'm like, we are, yeah, each member individually, because
Mhm.
yes, I'm just gonna say that. So we can add that. So what do you want to do? We got rid of 2. Good way that we're gonna do that. We're only gonna take this one from 4.
Mhm.
What do we want to do about these first 2 paragraphs of 1? Do you want me to send that to you with 3 so you can look at it?
Can you blend everything that we agreed upon?
Yeah, I was gonna send that to you into one
into
document.
one document
Can.
that we can then look at, and that would be the point to where we wordsmith or accept.
True.
Because
True.
right now, we've already said that we like each
Mhm.
part of these, and then with your ability to be such a good wordsmith, blending those.
I'm not gonna blend them for y'all.
That, we blend them?
I'm gonna blend them,
Okay.
you
and then we
wordsmith,
Wordsmith and accept.
because I want you
Okay.
to really feel like this is from you.
Okay,
But I'll blend them, you'll have this tonight.
okay.
The question is, when you gonna do this?
So can we do it? Do we have to wordsmith with each other in person? Or can we wordsmith,
We can't do a joint.
oh, because the Veronica, we can't work, so we have to wordsmith in person.
Or in a committee, then it gets referred to a full board. So I was thinking of the governance committee, but again, that's not, I mean, we are kind of sending the structure potentially to two board members. To then bring us a final thing. So we could send it to governance, or we could do another meeting. Probably the earliest would be April, but that's the only problem.
Yeah, that, to me, that is the problem. Like, how do we, I don't want us, like, my mind was like, March 20th, we're voting. So because, the reason why is because we have to move ahead of the principals, ahead of our immersive schools, ahead of our, eventual sites and teachers, because if we don't go in front,
Yeah,
then
because people have already said that.
they're like, well, we're not gonna do anything until the board does it. Right? How are we gonna feel protected if the board's not gonna have something? So that's my only concern, is there is an urgency behind this. So how do we, is there space in open session to take what we have, that we're the blended?
Does open session mean people can come and talk to you?
Yes, because it's done on the agenda. Would you suggest that not happen?
Yes, do
Okay.
not do it at open
So
session.
is there a,
It can't be in a closed session.
so then it has to, because we have to vote on it in open session.
But you can vote on it if it's complete.
Right, so can there, that's, so,
Well, maybe my suggestion is that we send it to the governance committee and.
the blended one that we're gonna get,
And
Okay.
then we try to schedule a governance committee meeting before the next board meeting, or even before the agenda gets.
before the.
Who's on the
20th.
governance committee?
Jimmy,
Oh, okay.
And
That sounds
then,
great.
wait, so you said, so that what I'm hearing is, you send us the blended version.
You'll have that tonight.
We have a governance committee
and then we
meeting,
can bring the draft to the rest. of
and
the
then we
board
bring
for
the
final.
draft
then they
for the
vote.
20th, and then there's a vote.
Yeah.
So it'd be under an action item.
Yes.
Yes.
So now
I
we
love
have
when
a
we work that out.
timeline, and you're with us on the governance
Yes.
committee, so, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I will
Okay.
send that tonight so you can start looking at
Okay.
it.
And nothing stops you or Cody from listening to the board meeting.
When we have a governance
Mhm.
meeting, you can
Right,
log in and
so-
listen to it.
Oh, okay.
That, I love, listen, there's nothing I like better than getting stuff done.
There's one thing that's on my mind, if I may mention, like, I keep thinking about how I feel reelection is the biggest enemy of progress and things like this.
Mm.
And I don't know how to move past that, and I would love for us to have a conversation about it.
Are we talking about you guys' reelection or are you talking about our presidential
No, in
election?
the bit, well,
Yes.
well, sure.
Because
But-
that's,
But that's, the yes, yeah,
that's,
absolutely.
that's the yes
That's-
that can
I
halt
think
everything.
individual
Yeah.
elections. I feel like people make certain decisions based on how is it going to affect
Yeah.
my reelection, which is very real, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course, we want people to get reelected, especially people. But I feel like, and I'm not talking about people who are running for reelection this time, right? Their vote.
Mhm.
But I'm talking about like any board member who's in this position constantly think it's a lot that I think, unless you're just like, not running again, right, or something.
Mm,
So how do we move past that? Because I think that maybe in this board, and I've seen in previous boards, people are political,
yeah.
right, to satisfy voters, right? Of course, which doesn't always translate to right policies, correct policies, right? So like,
Absolutely.
and we've had that conversation even too as a governance team, like, maybe we shouldn't touch that yet because it's going to create problems. Right?
Yeah. I think it goes
So-
back to our role.
Yeah.
I think we have to get really clear, and that's why the policy is gonna be
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
Here's what our role is.
Yes.
Whether your constituents love it or not, the role of the board is to interrogate and disrupt racist policies. And if the people in if the constituency is like, I don't like the way you're doing that, that's fine, and this is the role of this board.
Yeah.
And then strategically plan for the removal so that you can already have a plan in place. So if they're like, well, the way to shift that is when it's time for Director Smith-Folds to be reelected, if they're going to run someone against her, then you strategically plan for that early. What are we gonna do to develop whatever it is that you need to develop, partnerships or whatever, to plan for that? Because I think what happens is we always are playing defense.
Yeah.
But these are the same tools they've been using since times began, so let's play offense. Yeah, we gotta be strategic.
Yeah.
We gotta be strategic for our superintendent, right? Like, this is real and this is what happens in districts. I am working with the district that you're aware of, where they moved the superintendent, they brought in an interim who was really trying to do the work, but she's interim, so she's limited. And then they flipped the board right in the middle of all the work she was doing, and now she's looking for a job because the board has chosen not to continue this work.
I think one of the things that we have learned through our equity audit, that is when we become people heavy and not policy heavy, we always fail.
Yeah, you
Because
gotta have policy.
people leave, people die, people move on, people change. People are people. So if this board can show by modeling, the policy is heavy. The policy can create the traditions and the foundation and make it harder.
Just like the policies that are in now.
Yeah.
We're trying to unroot those policies, and they've been here forever. But we are trying to unroot them and replace them. And we hope that people who come in will tend that garden, but we also want to plant things that are didn't have to have a lot of water, right? Because we know the environment, so we
Yes.
plant those California succulents or whatever, because we know they don't get a lot of water. We gotta have rooted policy that doesn't have to have a majority Black and brown board to still be able to make an impact in the betterment of students.
And understand that folks will come and uproot those policies.
Right.
And so
Right.
it is imperative that I'm almost saying, I'm not saying it, but I'm almost saying, move quickly
Yes.
while you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Move quickly to control what you can, understanding that 3 years from now, systems move to self-correct.
Always. All right.
Thank you.
We did have the CSBA delegate thing.
Oh, we need to do
Shoot.
that real quick.
I gotta go.
Okay,
I'm sorry, you're gonna just hold on.
that's
All right.
okay.
All right.
So we
Just
can't
next
do it.
step.
Okay, so I could do it for a week. I could put it on the next meeting.
So that
Okay.
You'll put, so are we still live, Rosie? Thank you, everyone, so much. We are adjourning this meeting at 12:05. We want to thank Dr. Rogers Art.
Yes,
We look
thank you.
forward to our next retreat and our continual work on making WCC USC an anti-racist district. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We are adjourned. 12:05.
Thank you.
Thank you.